I had no warning. Those 4 words from Kyle Larson explain one of the most shocking moments of the 2026 NASCAR season. A tire failure at racing speed that turned the race leader into a passenger and turned a championship favorite's comeback into his worst nightmare. Larson finally addressed exactly what happened inside that car. And his explanation reveals far more about his season than the crash itself. Today, we are breaking down the complete story of the Brickyard 400 disaster. What caused it, what Larson said afterward, what it means for his championship hopes, and how a part-time driver named Cory Heim walked away with one of the biggest trophies in the sport. To understand why this crash cuts so deep, you first need to understand the situation Kyle Larson carried into Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The driver of the number 5 Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet is a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He is also the 2024 Brickyard 400 winner, which made him the defending champion of this exact event. On paper, that resume should have made him one of the strongest contenders in the field. But Larson arrived in Indiana sitting 6th in the championship standings, still winless in 2026, and trapped in one of the roughest stretches of his entire career. Look at his previous 3 weekends and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. At Chicagoland Speedway on July 5, 2026, Larson spun from the top 5, fell 2 laps down, and never recovered. At Echo Park Speedway, he suffered damage in a late race crash down the backstretch, and then went spinning again in a completely separate incident during the same event. Then at North Wilkesboro, Larson took damage after contact with Connor Zeilish on pit road. Although he managed to rally back and salvage a 15th place finish. 3 straight weekends, 3 different kinds of trouble, and a driver who began the summer inside the top 5 of the standings was suddenly watching his points cushion evaporate. That is exactly why the Brickyard 400 mattered so much. This is one of NASCAR's crown jewel races. Held at the most historic speedway in American motorsports, a 2.5-mile oval where Larson has extensive experience. His history at Indianapolis runs deeper than most of his competitors, because in addition to winning this race in 2024, he also started the Indianapolis 500 in both 2024 and 2025 as part of his famous double-duty attempts. If there was one track on the schedule where Kyle Larson could stop the bleeding and rebuild momentum before the playoffs, it was this one. And for 44 laps, that is exactly what was happening. Larson qualified 10th for the race, a solid but unspectacular starting position. What happened next was a masterclass in strategy from crew chief Cliff Daniels and the number 5 team. On lap 27, Larson came down pit road for an early green flag stop, undercutting several drivers ahead of him. As the rest of the field cycled through their own stops, Larson climbed rapidly up the scoring pylon. By the closing laps of Stage 1, the number 5 Chevrolet was out front leading the Brickyard 400 with Ty Gibbs behind him and a stage victory just 5 to 6 laps away. Larson was managing his fuel, protecting his equipment, and positioned to bank valuable stage points. The car was stable. The strategy had worked to perfection. Nothing about the afternoon suggested that disaster was seconds away. Then came lap 45. Entering turn 3, a rear tire on the number 5 Chevrolet suddenly failed. There was no contact from another car. There was no debris incident. There was no gradual vibration building over several laps to warn the driver that something was wrong. The tires simply let go, the rear of the car snapped around, and Larson backed hard into the outside wall before the car slid down across the racing surface. The entire sequence took roughly 1 second. At that speed, with that kind of failure, no driver in the world saves that car. Larson immediately radioed his team that he believed a tire had failed, although even he was not certain which one. That detail matters, because the confusion around this crash tells you how violently fast it happened. Early reports indicated a right rear failure, while later reporting from Indianapolis identified it as a left rear tire. When Larson was asked directly, he said, "I just had a tire let go. I think left rear. Not sure if it was left or right rear, but I think it was left rear." Think about that for a moment. The driver who was sitting in the car feeling every input through the steering wheel and the seat could not definitively say which corner of the car failed, because the spin happened before his brain could even process the information. On the pit box, Cliff Daniels reacted with visible shock and disbelief, and he was seen speaking with Goodyear representatives shortly after the incident, searching for answers about why a tire with relatively low wear had failed without warning. Meanwhile, safety crews rushed to the scene as the caution flag flew. Thankfully, Larson climbed from the damaged Chevrolet under his own power, walked to the ambulance, and was checked and released from the infield care center without injury. NASCAR's modern safety systems did their job. The championship implications, however, could not be repaired so easily. The final result, 39th place. Dead last. One single point scored from one of the most important races of the regular season. Outside the infield care center, Kyle Larson broke his silence, and his response was remarkable for what it did not contain. There was no anger. There was no blame. There were no excuses. His first reaction was blunt and simple, obviously disappointing. When asked to walk through the crash, Larson gave the answer that defines this entire story. "I had no warning. When I lifted, I felt it drop and spun," he explained. He also directly shut down the theory that he had pushed the tires too hard while running out front. "We just had a tire let go," Larson said. "I wouldn't say pushing it had anything to do with it. I was only going 3/10 quicker than I had been with saving fuel. It was just a little bit of bad luck, I guess." That statement is critical because it removes driver error from the equation entirely. 0.3 of a second per lap at Indianapolis is a marginal difference, especially while managing fuel. This was not a driver abusing his equipment to build a lead. This was a driver conserving, protecting, and executing and losing everything anyway. What stood out most was how Larson spoke about his team. "I'm proud of this number 5 Chevrolet team," he said. "We qualified 10th and did what we had to do to gain the track position to get to the lead. We executed all of that really well." There was still obviously a lot of the race left, but I feel like we were positioning ourselves within the race and within the strategy to set ourselves up well to go after a win. He closed his comments with the mindset of a champion refusing to dwell on circumstances he cannot control. "It's a bummer, but we'll get back after it at Iowa." In a separate exchange, he summarized the afternoon with a phrase every racer eventually learns to accept: "It's a bummer, but it's just a part of racing." Now let us talk about why this crash is bigger than one bad Sunday. With this result, Kyle Larson has now recorded 3 finishes of 30th or worse in his last 4 races. And by some counts, 4 finishes outside the top 30 in his last 5 starts. For a 2-time champion who entered the year as a title favorite, those numbers represent a genuine crisis. The points damage was immediate and severe. Larson entered the Brickyard 406th in the standings and left it in 8th, dropping 2 positions in a single afternoon. Here is where the schedule turns the pressure up even further. Only 4 regular season races remain: Iowa Speedway, Richmond, Loudon, and Daytona. Under the new 2026 playoff format, every single point of seeding matters heading into the chase reset after Daytona. Larson no longer has races to give away. And the pain at Hendrick Motorsports did not stop with the number 5 car. Not long after Larson's exit, his teammate Chase Elliott hit the wall following contact with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., forcing the number 9 Chevrolet behind the wall as well. 2 of the organization's flagship entries were eliminated from contention at one of the biggest races of the year. If there is a silver lining for Larson, it is this: the speed was real. The strategy was real. The execution was real. This was a mechanical failure, not a performance problem, and that distinction matters enormously heading into the playoffs. Larson's tire was also not the only one that failed at Indianapolis. On lap 96, Daniel Dye lost control of his number 78 Colleague Racing Chevrolet, exiting turn 3, and slammed the wall with his own suspected tire failure, ending his afternoon. "I thought it was the right rear, but I don't have enough laps in the Cup car to know what a flat tire feels like," Dye admitted afterward. Then, on lap 120, the biggest crash of the race erupted when Ryan Blaney was spun after contact with John Hunter Nemechek, sending the number 12 team Penske Ford into the wall entering Turn 3 and collecting 9 cars in total. That crash carried a $1 million consequence because it buried Blaney in the running order and handed the NASCAR in-season challenge and its $1 million bonus to Todd Gilliland. While all of that chaos unfolded, one driver kept his afternoon spotless, and his name is Cory Heim. The 24-year-old part-time driver of the number 67 Toyota for 2311 Racing held off Christopher Bell and Joey Logano over the closing laps to win the 2026 Brickyard 400. This was Heim's second Cup Series victory of the summer, following his win in the inaugural race at Naval Base Coronado, 2 triumphs in only 15 career Cup starts. That means a part-time driver has now won more races this season than Christopher Bell and more than 3-time champion Joey Logano. Heim did not hide how difficult the final run was. "That was a damn handful," he said. "I was hanging on for dear life once the shade went down and the pace picked up." His crew chief, Booty Barker. Put the achievement into perspective, this is the most difficult race to win. Even Christopher Bell, who stalked Heim for lap after lap waiting for one mistake that never came, gave his rival full credit. Cory put together a magnificent last run. He did a great job, and he didn't make a mistake and won the race. The bigger story is what Heim represents. He is the reigning NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series champion. He will move into the number 35 car full-time for 2311 Racing in 2027, and team co-owner Denny Hamlin is watching his development investment pay off in real time. "For a part-time driver, it looks like they are doing a pretty great job," Hamlin said. Competition director Dave Rogers went even further, saying that with Heim's talent, "I don't think there is a ceiling." Meanwhile, Ty Gibbs, who inherited the Stage 1 victory after Larson's crash and led 46 laps with race-winning speed, faded on strategy late in the day and finished 12th. So this is where the 2026 season now stands. A part-time phenom is peaking at exactly the right moment, conquering a crown jewel at Indianapolis. A 2-time champion is enduring the worst statistical stretch of his career through almost no fault of his own. Kyle Larson now gets an off week before the Iowa Corn 350 at Iowa Speedway on August 8, 2026, followed by the final sprint through Richmond, Loudon, and Daytona before the chase begins. He has the speed. He has the team. He has the composure. What he does not have is time. So here is the question for you. Can Kyle Larson bounce back before the playoffs, or has this brutal stretch already broken his championship momentum? Drop your prediction in the comments below.